I have just done the 10 greatest noses in rock and roll ranked. A very, very important video. And once that had finished, I thought, you know, I can't have that video exist without also looking at the 10 ugliest musicians in rock and roll, right? So I got a piece of paper, started working it out. Very quickly, I came up with a list which I have ranked into a certain order. Now, what's interesting on this list is there's some people who you don't really notice that they're ugly, but they are really ugly. There's some people that are sort of have used their ugliness as part of their appeal, and there's a couple where it just doesn't seem to have affected them at all. Now, the guy I've got at number 10, I would put into the latter category. Right, it's quite surprising that this guy has been able to cut through, and not only cut through in the music business, but cut through in the popular end of the music business, where looks are so important, and become such an absolutely huge figure. And in this respect, I do want to give him some respect for this, because he's achieved something which very, very few have. Now, there has been a preponderance of ugly blokes in popular music recently, and I'll get onto that in a minute, but I think he pioneered it, although he didn't pioneer the look, he just pioneered the concept. So I have to say that and qualify what I'm saying. Now, of course, the guy I've got at number 10 is Ed Sheeran.
Hi. Hi.
So Ed Sheeran, posh boy Ed Sheeran, I think his parents own some sort of private school or something, you know. So, of course, this is the big way things are done in the music industry nowadays, you know. If you're quite posh and your parents are quite connected, when you finish school, you don't necessarily have to go off and get a job so that you could put food in your mouth. You're able to swan about doing, you know, whatever you want. And, of course, what Ed Sheeran wanted to do was go around with his acoustic guitar, singing his songs. And of course, and if I'd have seen him at that point, I would have gone, well, mate, you know, your songs are all right, quite catchy. But the trouble is, you're ginger and ugly, and nobody wants to see an ugly ginger bloke doing this. You know, that's what I would have said to him. Now, one of the things that Ed Sheeran did was just a few years before he emerged, the great Katie Tunstall, who is a really talented musician, she came out on Jules Holland's show. And she did this little thing where she had a loop pedal and an acoustic guitar. She did this whole song and built it all up. And no one had seen that at the time. Nobody. And I can remember watching it and going, oh my God, that's amazing. That Katie Tunstall's amazing. And because of that, she then had a single. And I felt the single was a bit of a letdown when I heard it, because when she played it on Jules Holland, she was doing it with all the looping things. Well, Ed Sheeran saw this, I reckon. And he thought, you know something? I might be ugly and ginger, but if I do that loopy thing, then maybe that will take people's minds off, you know, what I look like. And it did. And he suddenly not only became a successful star, but he became one of the most successful popular musicians in the world. And then, when I heard this sort of on the music industry underground, he then started, you know, let us say, attracting ladies at a high rate. And of course, being an ugly ginger bloke, he was like a kid in a sweet shop, wasn't he, old Ed? I think he's calmed down a little bit now. Ed has. He does write catchy hooks. He does. I've got no problem with Ed in himself, you know. He really sings and he plays the guitar, and all that's good in terms of pop music, which is so wretched, you know. You got to grab onto anything. But the one thing I don't like him for, it's the fact that they went, you know, this is what the music industry is like. So, oh, Ed Sheeran's become famous. Why has he become famous? Because he's ugly. Oh, we need to sign ugly people up. So they start to go and sign ugly people. And they end up going for this sort of overweight bloke with a big beard and a face tattoo. And there's been a whole host of them. He's had them in hip-hop, ugly, fat, beardy blokes, right? And that are usually called something like Bin Man, you know, or something like that, you know. And these guys always have a sweet voice, and everybody wants to look, all the mums want to love them because they look like they want to kill you, But when they get chat to them, they're actually quite sweet. He's quite sweet. I know he's got a face tattoo and he looks like he wants to kill you. But I don't think he does want to kill you. And that makes me like him, you know. So that has changed the dynamic. Now, I think we need to go back to having good-looking pop stars again. Properly good-looking pop stars. Not Weasley-looking pop stars. And, you know, not ugly ones. We need to go back to some properly good-looking ones. Ed Sheeran's starting something now. Hasn't happened with the ladies, has it? You know, there's been no ugly ladies come out, and then there'd be a spate of big fat women with beards, you know. I will get off this subject. I can see if I keep going, I'm going to get in trouble. So at number 9, I have Janis Joplin. Janis Joplin is almost like the Jimi Hendrix of The Voice. She comes out in the mid-60s and she has a way of singing which has a power, has its roots in American music, black American music, soul, gospel, and also country music. Her voice sounds so ripped and distorted. And Janis is a true rock star. When you watch her perform, she's incredible. And she's so incredible that she has a magnetism about her, which offsets the fact that she was actually, you know, a bit ugly, really. Now, I don't like calling ladies ugly, and I feel uncomfortable as an English gentleman here right now in calling Janis Joplin, especially as she died young as well. And I feel like she was a bit of a tragic character. But I have to say, I've spent many a time watching videos of Janis in my head trying to make her look like she's not ugly. So is she attractive? I don't know, you know, I don't know. Because, of course, this is the thing about rock and roll. Rock and roll has enabled many a man to be able to pull a woman that is way out of his league normally. But it doesn't happen the other way around for women. And I think the reason is because women, right, not all women, I don't want to be sexist, this is just it's sort of an evolved trend, I would say, an evolved trend amongst the ladies, is that when a lady gets sort of pregnant, you know, when you're a human being, you can't just pop that child out in like a horse would. You know, the horse gives birth and then the baby horse is running around straight off. It's not like that when you're a human being, because of our big brains, you see. Our big brains have caused all sorts of problems for women, really. So once the baby's born, they really have to carry that baby around. They have to be looked after, don't they? And so women are always looking for a partner that's not only handsome, but can also look after them through that period and protect them, right? Now, the feminists don't like this, but I think it's a fact, right? I'm straying into a territory. It's really hard to talk about anything nowadays without somebody telling you can't talk about it. Well, I'm talking about it so they can get stuffed. Anyway, so in the wild, I mean, you don't have to do it now. Feminists can do what they want now, stick the child in childcare and get some other woman to look after it for them because they're wealthy. But, oh, you're so political, Andy. So, in the wild, a couple of years. And so women are always looking for resourceful men. I don't know what it's like in America, but here in the UK, women tend to like firemen. They like firemen. And I think it's because firemen come and rescue you when you're in trouble. You know what I'm saying? They rescue you. I'm going to move my camera a little bit because I'm getting the light's changing here and it's getting a bit strange. I'm going to sit back and get more in the shadows because it makes me look old and ugly. I don't want to look ugly on this one. And then say, well, Andy, you can't talk because you're really ugly with your harsh light lighting up your face. Well, they're going to say that anyway, aren't they? Especially with the sort of slightly, what's the word? Controversial opinions I have that I deliver in my dry and witty English way. Just sliding them in there. You know, dig at feminism there, you just did. I am a feminist. I think women should be able to go out to work and do stuff like men. You know, they should be given a chance to do that. But in the end, when we lived in nature, it wouldn't have been like that. And this is why women like firemen, because they come around and sort them out. You know, the average firemen are just like normal looking blokes. They're not handsome or anything. But women always get excited when they know firemen are around. And rock and roll musicians, because I think the rock and roll musician gets up and they sort of command the place, and they seem to be resourceful. to the woman. But men don't care about whether women are resourceful, even when they're as talented as Janis Joplin. Now, I like Janis Joplin, as you can probably tell. I think she's great. You know, I think she's a great singer. I'm trying to position myself as that more nonchalant. One that I don't like so much, and I've said this elsewhere, is Patti Smith. And God, she's ugly, isn't she? Now, when I last spoke about Patti Smith, I made out that she'd got a moustache throughout the video, and I actually photoshopped a moustache onto her and didn't mention that. And then certain people in the audience who haven't got a sense of humour were going, you put that moustache onto Patti Smith. Of course I put that moustache onto Patti Smith. Of course I did. As you can see on this video, I haven't actually got a photograph of Patti Smith. I've gone one better and I put a picture of Charles Bronson up. So there's your joke. There's the bit of humour for you. If you don't get it, it's not my fault, but some people will find that funny. I know I'm finding it funny just thinking about it. There it is. Good old Patti. There she is. Patti Smith, that is. And what does Patti Smith do when she's not writing awful songs about horses? She goes round the community as a vigilante, killing burglars and yobs and thugs. That's what she does. And if you think about that, that can only make her seem better in your mind. Really. I don't want to really talk about her. Who have I got number 7? Right. This bloke's a rock icon. And he shouldn't be, but he is. And he's one of the greatest rock icons of all time. And I think this guy's a bloody genius. And I love him. And that is Angus Young. But Angus Young is an ugly little bloke, isn't he? Right? He really is an ugly little bloke. And as he's got older, and I respect him for this, he hasn't bothered to do anything. He's never had plastic surgery. He's never done anything, you know, dyed his hair. He just looks worse and worse. Now, the bloke, I think he's coming up to around about 70 years old now. And I mean, that's a reasonable age. But my God, there's some 70-year-olds that look way better than he does, really, if you think about it. I mean, you know, I don't know what to say about Angus. And when I see him running up and down now as an old man with his grey hair flapping with his school uniform on, I don't know. I don't know whether it works anymore. Anyway, he's an ugly bloke. That's what it is. Now, I will put up a photograph of Angus with his wife now. That's the power of rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. At number 6, I have Meatloaf.
You do not want to with me. You look in my eyes, I am the last person in the world you ever want to with. You understand me?
Right. I don't know what to make of Meatloaf. He really managed to not just get away with it like Angus Young, but his fat ugliness, he was able to utilise in a way that it was like when I was a kid, you know, before I got into rock and roll, I was a big fan of American 70s cop shows. And what I noticed is that when you looked at the American cop shows, they were all exactly the same, except each one had a feature. Okay, each one had a feature. So obviously, Ironside was in a wheelchair. That was what his feature was. Okay, Kojak was bald. That was his feature. Starsky and Hutch, they were obviously gay. That was their feature. Who else did you have in the 70s? You had that Vegas bloke, and he had a car that he could park in his living room, which I thought was the best thing ever. So I would go through, so it's all basically the same, you know. But they've all got their feature, haven't they? And then when I got into rock music, I realised that it was a little bit like that as well. And Meatloaf's great feature was the fact that he was a big, fat, ugly bloke. And he flaunted this. So he would have a lady up on stage, and he would almost like do the old Harvey Weinstein tour on stage, wouldn't he? He would reenact a Harvey Weinstein audition on stage for us all to see. But of course, in the 70s, we had to turn a blind eye to that type of thing. His first album, Bat Out of Hell, is brilliant. And the track Out of Hell, I absolutely love. Then after that, he did I just think he got worse and worse, and I don't like him really. Although the very thing that I am talking about is personified in his song and video for Dead Ringer, which he did with Cher, which is where he walks in with his gang into a bar, and Cher is on the other side with her gang, and as soon as they see each other, it's like sexual magnetism, and they go into this sort of flirting through song, which of course nobody points out that Cher could, Cher could. I've just realised Cher could have been on my Big Noses video on the other one, couldn't she? Bloody hell, there's millions of them. Anyway, I'm going to move on from Meatloaf. I don't want this video to go on for too long. It's stupid. At number 5, I've got Marilyn Manson. Now, Marilyn Manson is a really bloody ugly bloke, isn't he? We can look at his, because everyone keeps putting out his school picture, don't they, on the net, and we can see how ugly he was. And when you're that ugly, then, you've got to capitalise on it. He's capitalised on it. And so really making himself even more uglier through a combination of makeup and contact lenses and his own ugly face, which is the canvas on which he has created his rock star persona, old Marilyn. But a little bit like Robert Smith, he won't let it go, will he? And he's still pushing it now. And now he looks like this. And to me, he looks like an old lady from the 1920s. He looks like he should be in Hinge and Bracket. Do you remember Hinge and Bracket? Although Hinge and Bracket were far more prettier, even as women or men, than Marilyn Manson was. He's an ugly bloke, Marilyn Manson. Now, recently, he seems to have, all the sort of weird Marilyn Manson things that he got up to in the 90s are now coming back to haunt him, because everyone's now, reporting him for all the dodgy things he's done. I don't know whether he's that repentant about it. And in a way, again, there's a whole host of them here, but he's another one where ugliness has not been a barrier for him, because rock and roll has been able to surpass his ugliness in terms of his attractiveness to women, which is quite incredible, because he's horrific, isn't he? He's horrific. So this is at the point of the video halfway through when I want to explain why this video is so important and why it needs to be on YouTube. If we're talking about rock and roll, we could talk about all the factors that created rock and roll music and all this type of thing. But with this video and its sister video, The Biggest Noses in Rock and Roll, it becomes quite apparent that the main reason rock music exists is so ugly blokes could pull women. And this is like, I'm not joking here. We can talk about all the other stuff. You never mention that. Never mention it. But that's why they're there. That's why those bands were formed. That's why the songs were written. That's why they've got the lyrics that they have. That's why it's basically they're on stage going, you should go off with me. Try and ignore the ugliness. I'm playing guitar. Oh, here we go. Number 4. Now, I think I've got the right bloke here, because I'm not a fan of this band, as you all know, and the band is the Ramones. Now, the Ramones look preposterous anyway, all of them. I often think that they look like a sort of rock and roll Three Stooges, although there's 5 of them, is there? I don't know anything about the Ramones, I can't stick them. Now, the big, tall, ugly one is Joey Ramone, is that the one? Who has a ridiculous haircut and no chin. Right, no real charisma whatsoever, and yet he has become an icon of rock and roll. I have a great difficulty with the Ramones. When I listen to the Ramones, they always sound tired. They sound tired. They don't sound all raucous and rocking like everybody thinks. I don't feel the big visceral energy. When I listen to them, I just hear this sort of like this sort of going on, and lots of strumming, and then you would have thought, if you're going to have a band like that, see, even the New York Dolls, they had, who was the lead singer of the New York Dolls? Was it Johnny Thunders? He was cool. Iggy Pop, these are cool people. You might have simplistic rock and roll going on, but they could strut around. But Joey Ramone, he's rooted to the spot. He's absolutely awful. He really is. Except that we got people so ugly above him, because he's not that ugly compared to the ones I've got coming up, who really are ugly. You know, he's not massively ugly. It's a lot of it is accentuated by the fact he's like 7 foot tall, isn't it, with old Joey Ramone. I don't get the Ramones. I'm going to be quite honest with you here, because I know I'm going to get some hate for this. Right, and people are going to start calling me ugly, especially if I get the light on me like that. And I look all yellowy. It's not my fault. It's really early in the morning, and the sun's coming up, you see. The sun's coming up. And let's try and adjust this a little bit better. If I go over like that. There we go. You could have a bit of a... Seeing the sun coming up now. It's very early here. Very early here. You know, because I've got to be honest, I didn't really want to make these videos. I'd written them down as ideas. I thought, you can't do that, it's so ridiculous. And I was lying in bed this morning. I thought, oh, come on, just do it. Who cares? Life's too short, isn't it? You know, this is just a bit of fun if you're watching it and you've got to this part 20 minutes in. It's only going to be a short video. You know, I'm just trying to entertain you a bit with a bit of humour at ugly people's expense. Now, you might think that's morally wrong to do. You might say you shouldn't be taking the mickey. I wouldn't if it was a normal people, but all these people are famous and rich. I know some of them are dead, but they're famous and rich. They can take it. They know exactly what they've done. They know exactly what they've done. Shall we move on? At number... Look, computer's gone on. Hang on, here we go. At number 3... I have a bloke that I respect. He's like the polar opposite of Joey Ramone. And yet they were very good friends, apparently. And that was Lemmy and Joey Ramone. Lemmy was very good friends with the Ramones. I think he was a fan of pure rock and roll, and he appreciated the pure rock and rollness of the Ramones. I understand that. Now, Lemmy was a really ugly man. He personifies exactly what I'm talking about, you know. He's got quite an ugly face that he is augmented with a ridiculous moustache that you would expect to see on a Victorian gentleman. You know, one of those that sort of comes down here and then it sort of joins up here like this. You know, he's got that whole thing going. Sometimes it just goes down. He has a bit of a gap, but it's definitely something that you would expect to see in the 19th century in England on somebody that was quite well off, you know, that was exploiting the poor. You know, that's a sort of moustache that you would have for, you know, basically exploiting children in cotton mills. And Lemmy has that look, but then he augments that look by dressing like somebody in the Third Reich. Think about this. This is why he's a bloody genius, this man. You know, so Lemmy is an ugly bloke. He grows a Victorian moustache. He dresses like a Nazi, right? He then joins Hawkwind. And he gets sacked from Hawkwind for his drug taking. Think about it. I mean, this is rock and roll personified. Then he decides to leave that, and he goes, right, I'm going to form a band. What shall I call the band? And he wanted to call Motorhead Bastard. That's what he wanted to call it. That is their real name, if you think about it. Motorhead. Now, Motorhead is a slang, American slang for someone who is on speed, I believe. Although there was Motorhead Sherwood, who was a member of the Mothers of Invention, and I often wonder whether Lemmy, of course he would have been a fan of the Mothers of Invention. And they were a lot of ugly bunch of people, weren't they? And they wrote songs about how ugly they were. Anyway, Lemmy, then to top it all, ladies and gentlemen, once you've got all that in place, he's got these two things here. Now, what are they? Are they spots? No. Are they boils? No. Are they moles? No. What are they? What are those two things? I mean, you might have one. I haven't got one. I've never seen one on anybody else, I don't think. Maybe normal people, when they have them, they have them removed. He's got two, all right? And you feel that all this ugly power is personified into those two things, which you would think that if he was out and about trying to, you know, chat up the ladies, that when they saw that thing on his face, they'd go, oh, no, but apparently not. Apparently not. And he rejoiced in the fact that he was a ladies' man. He really rejoiced on it. When the AIDS epidemic came out, he was famous for saying, somewhere out there's a woman with my name on her, as though she was some bullet. That, you know, when someone says, I don't think I said that right, you know, I'll have the quote up on here, I think. Out there is a he's probably said girl knowing him. Out there is a girl with my name on her, as though that's the one that's going to come along and kill him. Now, he didn't kill him. He actually got to 70 years old, which I think was pretty good for Lemmy. There is a sculptor called Andy Edwards. He's got the same name as me, and I am not him. And he's made a sculpture of Lemmy, and it's up in Stoke-on-Trent where Lemmy was born. Now, these sculptures I usually hate. They always look like Harrison Ford when he gets cast in carbonite in Empire Strikes Back. You know that look when they see a rock and roll statue, they always look like that. This one doesn't look like that. It's absolutely magnificent. So I salute my namesake for pulling that off. It's a brilliant bit of sculpting, excellent, and it's really personifies what was so great about Lemmy. And I bet he enjoyed, you know, sculpting those two bits and getting those. I bet when he was working it out and making it, I don't know how they make it. I think, does he do it in clay and then they get cast into bronze? I don't know how it's done. But I badger when he was doing the clay and he he rolled up the two balls and stuck them in. I bet he did it last, didn't he? It's not done yet, everybody. You watch this. It doesn't quite look like Lemmy though. Wait. And then he went, oh my God, it's Lemmy. Number 3 in the charts of the ugliest men in rock is Lemmy. At number 2, we have, of course, I've put him at number 2, not number 1, but I find him repulsive. And he has no redeeming features. Even Joey Ramone has more redeeming features than this bloke. And of course, it's that ugly little Irish goblin known as Van Morrison, who is ginger, he's chubby, he's got no real facial features. He looks like someone has got a piece of putty and punched it, right, until it vaguely resembles a head. And then they've stuck some ginger hair on it and a black hat and got him to go out there and yelp his horrible songs at everybody. Van Morrison, right, would be awful if he was good looking, okay? But if he was good looking, you could say, yeah, I know his songs are rubbish, but, you know, people probably go to the gigs and he's got a magnetic personality and he puts the songs across well, you know. There's a singer-songwriter called John Prine, and I have an album by him and I've never listened to it. It came into my possession. So the other day I got this album by John Prine and I put it on in the car and I was driving it along with my kids and my kids were like, Dad, what's this? I said, I don't know, it's this bloke called John Prine. And there he was strumming away, every tune was in the same key, same 3 chords going around, really, really boring, barking his meaningful lyrics that I got no interest in. But I'm not going to pick on John Prine because his voice was reasonably pleasant. His guitar playing was actually quite nice. And from an aesthetic point of view, yes, middle of the road, easy listening, dressed up as intelligent music. Guess it may be that, right? But John Prine, I'm not saying he's the best looking bloke in the world, right? I don't know anything about him. I don't even know if he's alive or dead. But look at him on the cover, he looked like a reasonable fellow. But Van Morrison, if you get all of that and amp it up and put it in an ugly little fat bloke's body, you get him. Now, I've got to be honest, I hate him so much that if you got musicians you absolutely love here, and you start going around the circle of love to hate, so you go all the way around, you get here. So you start off with the people I absolutely love here right at the top, which would be like John McLaughlin and Narada Michael Walden, Billy Cobham, all the ones I really love, and you walk around Frank Zappa like this. And then you get round to the bottom and then there's ones again, JK, I like Jamiroquai, I'm not too sure about JK. And he goes like this all the way round. And then you start to get to the ones I don't like, got Simply Red comes up, Lighthouse Family. And then when you get right to the end of that circle, right to the end, you get to Van Morrison. Now at that point, you are right next to the ones you love. And I have to be honest, as time's going on, if I keep on like this, I think I'm going to love Van Morrison for really representing everything that's awful, because I can't help but feeling he's got his big tongue in his fat little cheek doing all this. And when I found he'd done this sort of album called Contractual Obligation, where he'd just done the most obvious pop song over and over again with the same 3 chords, and he just banged that out and they were all about dancing and, you know, things like that. And I listened to it and I thought, well, I actually quite like this. I like this way more than Astral Weeks. Why didn't he pursue this area? And but it shows he's got a sense of humour, doesn't it? There is a Van Morrison album. Right. Now I've hated him so much. You're at the end of the video. I'm going to tell you some truth about Van Morrison, right? Do you want to know where my Achilles heel is? Because you're all there trying to argue against me. He did an album in the 70s that I did really like. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll put a photograph of it up here. And it's a great album. I listened to it. It's a bit funky and soulful, and it's a good album. I wouldn't say I'd buy it and love it, but it's quite pleasant. But in 1979, Frank Zappa brought him in to sing on El Shanker's album, Touch Me There, on a track called The Dead Girls of London. Zappa had fallen out with Warner Brothers, and of course Van Morrison was signed up to Warner Brothers. And so in the end, Zappa had to redo the vocals. And I have to be honest, the Van Morrison version is so brilliant. And to hear Van singing a Zappa song and to hear that voice in that context is absolutely wonderful. And what that does, it shows me that I could like him. I mean, I've gone through all the albums because I'm so vehement in my hatred of him. I have gone through all the albums. There's some albums that are quite good there. It's more the fact of how he is revered. That's what I don't like about Van. And the fact that he's a little fat, ugly ginger goblin. A little bit like Ed Sheeran. We've started and we ended with the same thing, haven't we? I bet Ed Sheeran likes Van Morrison. Oh, it's one of my favourites. Absolute genius. I met him once, and I couldn't believe I met him. He was very rude to me, but I didn't care because he can get away with it because he's Van. Van Morrison. I mean, is that his first name? Or is Van, is that his first name? There was an actor called Van Johnson, but I think that Van wasn't his first name, was it? It was his second name. Right. When you do certain lists, number one is just always difficult to work out. Not in the case of this. There's someone in rock and roll, which is so obviously gets the title. This is like, when I was a kid, and we used to have comics, and bullying was still a good thing that you could do. They had, one of the comics had the Bash Street Kids, and in the Bash Street Kids, there was this bloke called Plug. And Plug was famous in the Bash Street Kids because he was massively ugly, really ugly, Plug ugly, right? I'm showing you a picture of Plug now. And for me, that is the platonic ugliness personified. This is perfection in ugliness. This is all ugly people are basically, they come from Plug. Plug in that comic, they managed to distill ugliness into that image there. And this bloke is so close to it. He's so close to the platonic perfection of Plug in his actual ugliness. It is, of course, the great Irish songwriter. Someone else I can't stick really, but I'm not going to criticise him. He probably liked Van Morrison, and Van Morrison probably liked him as well. They all love this bloke. I don't know why, if you're Irish and ugly and write boring songs, that you become known as a genius. Well, everyone thinks he's a genius. You lot probably do as well. Shane MacGowan. Now, I'm not going to say much about Shane MacGowan. He was a druggie. He drank a lot. He died relatively young because of his, terrible habits. What am I supposed to say about him? That Christmas song he wrote with Kirsty MacColl, it's probably the greatest Christmas song ever written. I do like that song. And maybe if I listen to him, my wife loves them. My wife loves the Pogues. She loves them. But she likes the Ramones as well. And she's not coming on, so don't ask her to come on. Right? She's not going to come on. Not my own wife coming on and usurping my position here, arguing against me. So we're going to finish up now. Thanks for watching the video. Like and subscribe, become a patron and all that. And I'm going to finish up with a little montage of Shane MacGowan for you, just so you can really bask in how ugly he was. Thanks for watching.